And welcome back to Moving Conversations. I'm Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How's it going on the West Coast there?
It was 45 degrees here in April yesterday. and it was 70 degrees the day before, which is very unusual for April. I don't live in Michigan. I don't live in Chicago. I live in California. I was freezing all day. It was like my body was like, what is happening here? Spring has sprung. Stop being so cold. How are
See,
you doing?
I was going to say here it's been freezing, but we've had cold rain. So with that rain, oh my gosh, it like gets you to the bone. I could not get warm enough in the house. I had, blankets on, and I
Yep.
had just sitting there sort of shivering, and my family's looking at me like I'm out of my mind. I'm like, I'm cold. Leave me alone. I'm from Hawaii. Leave me alone. I'm cold. So it's a better day today. Hopefully this weekend will be nice for both of us. We can get outside and do some things. And speaking of doing some things, we decided today to talk about something that I think it's overlooked a lot in both of our worlds.
Yes.
I think
Agreed.
personal trainers as well as Pilates instructors, yoga, everybody overlooks this because we take it as a given. But we're talking about cardiovascular fitness.
Yep. Endurance
work.
Yeah.
And there's two different types of endurance if you think about it, because you can do muscular endurance where you're just doing high number of repetitions.
Right.
And, we all can do that. But there's also just getting on a machine and going for a bike ride, doing the elliptical, doing something that's much more cardiovascularly beneficial, that's working your muscles, yes, but working them in a much different way than what you would in a normal gym. Because, well, let's take your husband, for instance, the wonderful Al. When he goes on these long bike rides, you're talking about thousands upon thousands of repetitions, not 20 or 30.
No, it's like that cadence is however, like, I don't know how many strokes a minute you do, but that's a lot. And it's for, 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think in general for personal trainers, I'll speak for myself. When I first sit down with someone and we're going over their goals and objectives, oftentimes they'll say they want to become more cardiovascularly fit, and I'll give them some parameters, but they're general parameters. And then I realized in doing the research for today's podcast, which is funny because all of this stuff is exercise physiology, which I took a long time ago, and it's all a refresher, but I'm thinking, man, I know all of this stuff. I remember it, but this is really sort of reaching back into the recesses of my memory about the reasons why we do cardiovascular work. So when I give these general recommendations and then we get busy doing the exercises and I work on strengthening, how often do I really talk to them about the cardiovascular work that they're doing? Besides, so you've been doing your cardio? Great. Move on.
Right.
So it was very interesting to sort of to say, okay, let's see what are the real reasons for this, because, I'm going to ask you this, and I'll answer it for myself as well. How often do you do cardiovascular work?
I do about 20 minutes. I have an elliptical at home.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll do that several times a week, usually it's 5 days a week. And then usually take a long bike ride once a week. And that's about it, really. Then I do, in terms of how I do my workouts, sometimes I'll do them in a little bit of a circuit high intensity way. So, my heart rate's going up and coming down and going up and coming down.
Sure.
But I would not say it's a focus for me. Like I'm not a like Al 450 miles a month bike rider. Like that's not who I am.
Right.
So I don't do that much steady, regular, committed cardio work for sure. I would say a light amount of cardio work.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people do. For me, a couple of years ago, I did a lot more cardio. I was doing probably 60 minutes a day, 5 days a week, because it was a lot more about weight loss and trying to do that. So I was literally looking for a caloric burn. So I was doing 60 to 90 minutes, 5 to 6 days a week. And that's a lot. My heart is very happy about that. However, recently, probably since the pandemic and beyond, I've been doing 4 days a week, 30 minutes per, getting my heart rate into my target zone, about 140 beats a minute, 145, which is fairly comfortable. I do it, at first thing in the morning, 5 a.m., get on the machine, get it out of the way. And then I do weight training after that, or, I do some weight training on the weekend. So I was looking at it and I thought, do I hit the numbers that the AMA or the American Heart Association or even ACSM, what are their parameters, what are their recommendations or their prescription for cardiovascular work. And I found this interesting, that the American Heart Association recommends 150 minutes of moderate intensity. So moderate intensity, we're going to talk about percentage of heart rate. It's probably going to be between 65 to 75 of your, maximum heart rate. Okay, that's your target, 65 to 75%. And I'd say getting it from 75 to 85 or even to 90 would go into more of the intense route. Intense, they say 75 minutes, but 150 minutes, that's a lot of minutes.
And this is a week, right?
That's per week. Yes, that's per week.
Yeah.
And that's
30 minutes, 5 days a week, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that's, and I thought, well, that's about what I'm doing. So that's not too bad. I figure I'm, in my target heart rate, I'm probably at about 70 to 75%. So, I'm getting closer, or I'm at 75 to 80% of my target heart rate. So that's great. I'm between, moderate to intense. But for our clients, getting them to do something like this, do you think they're going to be able to get into that moderate range by just doing something like walking? Because I can't. If I walk, I'm like at 90 beats a minute. I can't get anywhere near 140.
Unless and Sacramento is pretty flat, if you've been here.
Yep.
So if I'm hiking, if I'm walking, unless I'm going up a pretty serious grade, my heart rate is, honestly, it doesn't hit 100 usually.
Yeah.
And actually for me, in biking, if I'm biking and I'm biking on flat, my heart rate doesn't go much above 110.
Yeah.
So, cycling, I've really got to push it to get my heart up. Like in my case, my muscles will give out before my heart, sort of gets up into those ranges.
Yes.
And that's kind of where I'm playing with, is how do I get, the muscles strong enough to be able to actually work them hard enough to get my heart rate up. Because it just, for me, that balance doesn't work easily.
And that's an interesting thing you say that, because I found the same thing after my knee surgery years ago. They recommended doing the recumbent bike.
Yep.
And I was like Al, I was a cyclist, in college days and things, and doing a 50 mile or a century was no big deal on a weekend. I do that regularly. I was on my bike every day. That was my primary mode of transportation. So for me, my body's pretty efficient at the bike.
Yeah.
I got on the recumbent or the upright bike at the gym, and I got to tell you, I could not get my heart rate up.
Yeah.
My legs gave out. I got tired.
Yeah.
And my legs were burning way before I was ever getting my heart rate above, like you said, 100, 110. Now I have a low heart rate to begin with. Mine's usually in the low 50s at rest, sometimes even high 40s. But still, I have to work incredibly hard to get it up that in something that's not weight bearing. So I have to be
absolutely
on my feet. I have to be on an elliptical machine, or I have to be, using one of the treadmills where you're your own. Your own muscles machine. Are the machine rather than something just keeping up with the machine. So I found that really interesting, thinking about, okay, where is that target zone for people? And if you take someone sedentary, sure, going out and walking might be enough. But for a lot of our clients who have been working out for a little while, it's probably not going to be enough to get them into that moderate zone.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's just define that, because I don't know about you, but again, in Pilates land, cardiovascular right is not emphasized. It's just not. Even the most intense exercises or strategies or not methods, what I'm talking about, styles of Pilates is kind of doing a traditional classical workout. And there is a certain amount of speed and a certain amount of cadence, and you just kind of keep going. And the heart rate can get slightly elevated in that. And certainly, you can work it that way. But it's not the same as doing a sustained cardiovascular endurance. It's just not. It's not. It's going to be much more cyclical. It's much less full out for an extended period of time. And a lot of Pilates teachers that I know don't do a lot of cardio. They don't, it's not part of what they think their clients need. And a lot of their clients go to Pilates because they don't want to do cardio. That's not where their preference lies.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about targets there. You talked about
target heart
ranges, target heart rate. So just talk us through that. I know there's standard things you can all find, but talk us through that.
There's a couple different ways to measure your target heart rate. 220 minus your age is usually where we have to start. So I'm 53. So you take 220 minus 53, and yes, I'm not good at math. I'm not an accountant, so I'm actually going to get out a calculator here. So, and I have an old-fashioned one. So 220 minus 53, that gives me 167.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that should be my max. Now, I'm going to say this. That's not my max. Okay, I'm fairly cardiovascularly fit. I can work a lot harder than that. But for the average individual, that's where they say is the safe place to be for your maximum heart rate. And the older you get, obviously, that number is going to come down. Now, there's two different ways you can do this. You can take that number and multiply that times 0.65, which is sort of the bottom range of moderate, and then 0.85, and that's going to be your your intense range for 85%, 65%. So for me, 167 times that 65%, where is that? 0.65 is going to be 108. Okay. 108, I'm barely doing anything. I mean, that's not hard work at that. On an elliptical machine, there's no way that that's even working out yet. And my 0.85 is going to be 141. Well, this morning I was doing 145 on the elliptical and not even breathing hard. So I say this to let everybody know, everybody's body is different.
Yes.
And where their percentage is, yours and mine are probably going to be a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Al, who does a lot more cardio cycling outside, his is going to be different. We all have a little different. So these are general guidelines. Now, that's one way to do your target heart rate. The other way you can do it is by taking the max. So again, 167 is my max, minusing your resting heart rate.
Oh, that's interesting.
So you minus the resting heart rate. So my resting heart rate is usually around 50. So 167 minus 50 is 117. Multiply that by, I'm just going to say 0.85, your percentage, and then add back in your heart rate. And now I have 149. So probably a little bit more accurate for me. It takes a little bit more mathing skills. I mean, a lot of people don't want to necessarily do that because depending on what you've had, how much caffeine you've had, what you've had during the day, your resting heart rate could be all over the place. Just in general, 220 minus your age, multiply it by the numbers is generally considered the standard. And again, everybody's going to be different. So when I sit with clients, if they're already fairly cardiovascularly fit, a lot of times I will give them slightly higher numbers because I know they can work harder.
Yeah.
And they should be working harder.
Yeah.
If a client comes to me who's 65 years of age, who's fairly in shape, plays pickleball or tennis occasionally, and wants to start doing something else, and they say, well, where should I be cardiovascular wise? Well, do I really want to tell them, well, 95 is where you need to be, 95 beats a minute? That's a little low for someone who's fairly active.
Well, if they're playing pickleball at all aggressively, they're going to get beyond that pretty quickly, I assume.
Exactly.
So if they're running after a ball and responding, they're going to be above 95, I would hope, within moments, at least occasionally, right? They'll be going up and down, but certainly they're going to go beyond that.
So what I tell people, this is just from years of experience, okay, is I go more by respiratory rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So because you can also go by METs. METs is metabolic equivalent. You can go by how hard you feel you're working. There's a lot of different ways. Perceived exertion. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. For me, respiratory rate is the easiest way. So a lot of times I will say, if someone says, yep, I've been walking an hour every day, say, okay, how hard are you breathing?
Mm-hmm.
And if they say, oh, well, not hard. I said, if I was walking with you, could we talk? Oh, yeah. You're probably not working hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
You get to that point where if you're working on the lower side of your percentage, you're burning off a lot more of that, you're aerobic. So you're using oxygen. You can easily have a conversation. But as you get up towards what we refer to as that anaerobic threshold, where you're using a lot more of your oxygen that you're not able to recover fast enough, you're going to sound a little like this if you're trying to talk. And that's where I'd say, look, that's at that 85%. That's really where we want you to start training, to really engage your heart and exercise your heart to get that healthier. We want you to work a little harder, and it doesn't have to be sustained for 30 minutes. You can do intervals. You can do that for a minute and then back it down for 2 or 3 minutes. There's so many different methodologies to that. And we can cover a whole session on interval training down the road. But yeah, I tell them I want them to work just a little bit harder, for at least a short period of time, so they do get that elevation in their breathing rate. Something that I read and one of my doctor friends brought up to me and said, there is a study that said as long as you get to the point where you get to anaerobic threshold for a minute, you're going to exercise your heart enough that all you need is that 1 minute a day, and you're working out hard enough, and it's going to benefit your heart. I was like, okay. And this guy's he's a surgeon. He's very smart. And I'm thinking, so you're telling me that you run down the street and back, elevate your heart, you go at a full sprint, you elevate your heart rate to its maximum, and in that 1 minute, you're giving your heart the same benefit that I am doing 30 minutes at 140, 145 beats a minute. I have a hard time believing that, just physiologically. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
But again, he's basing his opinions on what works for his lifestyle, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, he tries to convince himself. And I say, hey, if that's working for you, fine. However, when you're ready to come back to earth, come on back and talk to me, and we'll figure out what's going to work for you. So there's a lot of different research that's been done on this stuff that really shows where you should be. So for me, I want to get their respiratory rate to be where they're having a slightly difficult time breathing, at least a little bit.
They're feeling
and
challenged.
They're feeling challenged, so that even if they are walking next to a friend, they might have a little bit of a breathing challenge, and that's great. That's great. You want that. You don't need to be completely out of breath. You don't need to feel like you need to pass out, but you want to have that breathing challenge, because that's going to literally challenge your cardiorespiratory. We're talking about the heart as well as the lungs. And we really want to challenge that in order for it to get stronger.
So one of the things that I always think about here, I think that was great. That really just clarified many things. So for those of you who don't have a background in exercise phys, and this is new to you, that was great, Brian, really just clear and straightforward. And one of the things that, you always have to look at with clients is, where are they now? Because I've had clients who are seriously sedentary and are not moving at all. And so for them, if they can commit to walking half an hour a day, that's at least going to get some blood pumping through their system, right? Their heart rate may not go up much, their breathing may not get hard, but there's at least movement going through the body. And I'm starting at the very base level, because so many of our clients, and we know this from the statistics, something like 80 to 85% of Americans exercise less than 20 minutes once a week.
Yes.
I mean, something like that. It's like they're fully sedentary.
Yep.
Right. And I'm like, I don't really understand how they can go somewhere and go grocery shopping for less than at least 20 minutes of walk around the grocery store every week. But whatever, people have their own issues. And so it's also like, where are they? And then where do they want to go? Because again, I've worked with a lot of high level athletes, and particularly things like dancers. And dancers are generally pretty funky on their cardio, because it's not something they emphasize. And dance is a very sporadic, like it's more like high intensity interval training kind of training, right? You're like, you do nothing, you're going at the bar, you're doing your warm up, you go across the floor for like 15 seconds or 30 seconds, and then you stop, and then you go to the other side, and then you do it again. And even a dance performance, you may be full out for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and you may not. You may be like, you go across the stage for 2 minutes, and then you stop and you wait for your next entrance. So dance has always been very, very sporadic that way, and not particularly sustained. And a lot of dancers that I know have had trouble with their cardio because they just don't do that. And when they do, they find they have much better endurance for everything they're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right. So cardio is always something that, when you are stronger cardiorespiratorily, it just gives you more endurance and a stronger foundation for whatever you want to do, whether it's Pilates or cycling or fitness or weight training or anything, right? So that's kind of where I try to get to, is how can we just increase where you are by some incremental amount, whatever that is for that person.
What's interesting is you brought up something that is pretty big in the fitness world, which is high intensity interval training versus long sustained, cardiorespiratory fitness,
Yeah.
Getting on an elliptical machine.
Right.
Because, and never the two shall meet. People are in one camp and they want to just do that. And I understand. Doing more of a high intensity interval training, I think, is much more oriented to someone who likes to play sports. Because if you're going to go out there and play soccer, you're going to play basketball, you're going to play tennis. It's something that is constantly changing, where you're going to elevate your heart rate and let it drop, and elevate and let it drop. So I think in that sense, it's great. But is it working? And it's definitely working your heart, because you get out of breath and then it comes back down. And then he gets out of breath and then it comes back down. So you definitely work the heart. There's no question. But is it as equal as the long sustained cardiovascular work that some people do, where they will do 45 minutes or an hour, or an hour and a half at a sustained, maybe not at 85 or 90% of their target heart rate, but at
still
70%.
staying within it, right? Staying within that range. Yeah.
And personally, I think there's something to be said for both. I really do, because both are going to elevate your heart rate. So first of all, let's talk about, what does cardio do? Okay, for your body. Okay, what are the benefits? Because there's a lot of different things that happen on both a cellular level as well as a heart level. So when we're thinking about this, I was sort of joking with my wife, and saying, we're going to talk about the most important muscle in the body. I say, no, not the one you're thinking about, the heart, because we really don't think about that nearly as much as we do when we're exercising. We think about, if, especially in our world, if we're doing a lot of rehab, we're thinking about, that specific body part, and then trying to get function in everything. But in reality, we're really working on the heart. And I went back and I was looking at some of the different things here. So cardiac response to exercise, okay? Left ventricle contractility goes up. And what that means is your left ventricle, the muscle, actually gets thicker and it has the ability to squeeze more, okay? Because really what you're affecting in aerobic work is you want to, as you increase your, you want to increase your VO2 max, the amount of oxygen that you can actually take in, okay? What that has to do with is heart rate as well as stroke volume. Okay, so we're talking about cardiac output, how much blood your heart is actually able to pump through your body.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
If you have a high heart rate, okay, your stroke volume often doesn't change that much. And that's the amount of blood that every squeeze of your heart, every contraction, is going to pump a certain amount of blood through your body. So that's your stroke volume. It squeezes and goes through. As you exercise, your heart rate goes up. Well, it's having to work harder. It's having to squeeze faster. So it's able to pump enough blood so that your muscles get oxygenated and they're able to continue working for a longer period of time. And that helps to get your volume, your VO2 max, increased. That's the theory. And that's usually what happens. But what most people don't think about is, as you work out and as you do it regularly, your heart actually, because it's a muscle, is actually, the walls are getting thicker. Okay, you're building the muscle. So now every time it contracts, it can put a little bit more volume of blood out there.
A little stronger
Each and every time. Something we don't think about when it comes to the heart is, as we age, we see cardiac fibrosis. We see it becoming more fibrous and less like a muscle and more like fiber. So it's not getting the same amount of contractile tissue squeezing with every repetition.
Oh, so just like we talk about in the fascia, where the muscle gets replaced by connective tissue instead of muscle tissue and loses its elasticity. So same thing here, that the cardiac muscle loses a little bit of that ability to really squeeze and release, and instead is a little, it's just those muscles aren't acting as efficiently.
Right. And you said it perfectly. You're not getting the expansion. So your
Hmm.
ventricle isn't going to be able to expand. The fibers are actually going to be tight. You're not going to get the expansion. You're not going to get like a balloon that is suddenly, the first time you ever blow up a balloon, you're pushing it, pushing it, pushing it. It doesn't really want to go anywhere. Well, that can happen to the heart, is that the
Mm.
fiber, it becomes more fibrous and tighter. And as the blood goes in there, well, it doesn't want to expand. It doesn't want to
Right.
inflate, basically. We want the left ventricle, especially, to be able to accept a larger volume of oxygen or a larger volume of blood, so that when it does squeeze, it can push more blood through the system. So when it becomes fibrotic, and that happens as we age and it happens with being sedentary, we don't have that same amount of volume of blood that's able to go through our tissues. So our walls become less muscular and they don't stretch as much. They don't open up and accept as much blood. So these are big time issues when it comes to cardiac, work, that it helps. We want to make sure we have that ability for the heart to expand and contract the way it should. And that way we're able to have a greater amount of, you know, VO2 max. Uh, Heart rate will often go up during exercise, but we have a faster response afterward of it coming back down to normal.
Right.
You,
That's the other thing, right? Is it's not just how fast you go up, but it's how fast you come back down. And a lot of
right.
times that speaks to cardiovascular health to some extent, right? That like if you're like boom, 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 and you stop and it's like ha boom, ha boom, ha boom, pretty quickly, that means your heart is able to react appropriately to the stimulus
Yep.
that's put into it.
It's recovering.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
recovering at that moment. And I don't know, ACSM way back when we used to have to take the test, it was much more for exercise physiologists than it was for personal trainers, because we
Right.
had to do things like figure out VO2 max. We had to test everybody, get their heart rate to its maximum, and then count, see how long it took for them to get back down to, their resting rate. And that showed where their cardiovascular fitness was to a certain degree.
Mm.
And someone who's not in shape, well, that stays elevated. That will not drop
Hmm.
very quickly. But someone
Right.
like, an athlete, you know, they may do some sprints or something like that. And then all of a sudden, okay, you can see that they're coming down. And before long, their body's back to, they've recovered. So that's a huge thing that we look at for cardiovascular fitness. And we want that. We really want that. Uh, Mitochondrial content within the cells goes up when we do cardiovascular work. We talked about this when we talked about why we do warm up and things like that for the muscle. I want cardiovascular work because I want more mitochondria within the cell. That's going to lead to greater oxygen utilization. That's going to lead to greater recovery and waste removal within the cells.
And the mitochondria, for those of you who are not so familiar with that, the mitochondria are, we call them the powerhouse of the cells.
Yep,
They basically produce energy for the cell, right?
yep,
And the amount of mitochondria that you have and how efficient it is a direct relationship to how much energy you have,
yep.
and how you can use it. And one of the things they're finding in long COVID and in all those chronic fatigue situations is the mitochondria are damaged. And that's what they're discovering is really part of that chronic fatigue problem, is that their energy production system in the body is down, kind of
Hmm.
like you've lost your power plants, if you
Yep,
will.
yep. And that can be within the actual heart, the
Yeah,
cells of
or
the heart,
everywhere.
or
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's really important for recovery as well. Because again, it's the amount of oxygen that you're taking in. You want more oxygen going to your muscles so they can recover faster, so they can get rid of the carbon dioxide quicker. They get rid of the waste. They use what's good, get rid of what's bad, and can do so quickly
Hmm.
and efficiently. And we are in such a society now of being sedentary that we're not moving nearly as much, not nearly as much as we should. And our bodies were never designed to just sit around.
No, they're designed to be moving all the time
Yeah.
and to have that circulation going and to basically having the cells be bathed in good stuff all the time, right?
Hmm.
Clean blood and oxygen and nutrition instead of kind of sitting stagnant for long periods of time and literally the blood getting stagnant and the nutrition not moving through the body the way it should.
Exactly. Exactly. So there's there's a lot to also be said about what happens to the actual capillaries within our circulatory system as well. because those capillaries will widen in order to deliver more oxygen if it's more cardiovascularly fit. You know, you have less resistance, less peripheral resistance within your arteries and your veins. So you're able to flow your, basically, the way I describe this is, think of your circulatory system, your blood, as being a river. You want it to be a raging river and not this slow trickling stream. You know, and the capillaries are the point at which they hit sort of the end. So your arteries are taking blood all the way to the muscle, and they go from arteries to arterioles. And then when they hit the capillaries is when they say, okay, now all you blood, all you oxygen out of the system. Let's go into the muscle. Okay, you go over here, you go over here, you go over here. And then it says, okay, now the waste products, come back in, come back in, come back in. It's like everybody get out of the bus, and now everybody else go get on the bus. And now we got to make the return trip through our venous system back to the heart. And that's how we, you know, take the oxygen into the muscles, take the carbon dioxide out of the system. And that's basically how the circulatory system works. Well, if you are better cardiovascularly fit, well, guess what? You've got a much faster bus that holds a lot more people. You know, you get a lot more oxygen to the system and can withdraw more cardiovascular because those capillary beds can widen and deepen. And it allows for greater utilization of oxygen and carbon dioxide elimination. So it really helps your circulatory system.
Yeah. And just as I'm getting practical here. Brian is our science guy today. I'm just kind of the commentary. So I'm the color commentary here. One of the things that I always think about with cardio and with all my clients is I want you to be doing something that you can feel your blood moving through your whole body, like every day. Right. I mean, again, at a very basic level, because I know, you know, I don't know about you guys, but when it's cold or even when it's hot, but particularly when it's cold and I wake up in the morning, my hands are not that warm. My feet are not that warm. And that's a lot of times why I'll do cardio first thing in the morning is because, and I do it until I can feel like the blood is pulsing in my fingers, the blood is pulsing in my toes, right? Like that circulation is actually going through my whole body. And that lets me know, like, all right, you know, everything's moved out. I'm cleaning out whatever happened in the night. You know, all those bad guys are getting on the bus and getting exhaled out, hopefully, or excreted out, depending on what's happening. And that's something I really think about in terms of cardio stuff, especially in cold weather, but even in warm weather. It's like sweating, moving, getting the blood flowing, you know, making sure your fingers are pink and not white. You know, all those things are silly, but those are things that just help me to realize, like, is my blood circulating or is it not? Like, is it moving or is it stagnant? And keeping it moving is really important.
And I think what you're doing is it's a good way to do something to wake yourself up, to get your body moving, to get your energy flowing, rather than just having coffee, rather than just having caffeine, which a lot of people, you know, feel the need to. And yet first thing in the morning, the more you can move, you're talking about natural endorphins through the body. You're releasing of those endorphins. Also, natural painkillers are going to be released. And I don't know about you, I wake up in the morning, I tell my wife, I feel sort of like watching Ozzy Osbourne walk. You know, I sort of hunch over, you know, going to the bathroom. My body isn't quite warmed up yet. I'm like, oh. And by the time I get to the bathroom, okay, things are moving around a little bit better. Okay, I'm moving around. But if I can get on and do cardio right away, then by the time my first client comes, my brain's going. I'm ready to go.
Agreed.
And it's just like, okay, my body's ready, rather than coming in and sitting down and doing paperwork. And I do that one day a week. I take my off day, but I will tell you, I can feel the difference. And when I do my workout and I do some release work, I do my cardio, I do a little bit of strength training, I do some core work. By the end of that, it's like, all right, I'm ready now. You know, I'm ready for the day.
And that speaks to there's a couple of other sides of cardio that I want to talk about. One is mental benefits. So there was a study done in the NIH in the UK, and they were basically comparing. It wasn't a double blind because you couldn't really double blind this, but they were basically comparing regular cardiorespiratory or cardiovascular exercise and antidepressants for changes in mental health, and they basically realized, like, they were equivalent.
Yeah.
So, you know, they had people and they just had them on a treadmill for, I think, 35 or 40 minutes or something every day versus taking, you know, Prozac or one of the antidepressants. And they discovered that the mental health benefits were pretty equivalent for the exercise, you know, cheap, for most of us, easy to do unless you live somewhere like Antarctica, right? I mean, there are situations where that's tricky, but
Yes.
for most of us, it's possible. Anyway, so there's the mental health benefits. The other thing too that I wanted to talk about or mention and have you talk about was there's this whole discussion about certain ranges of heart rate are more fat burning, some are
Yeah.
more this, some are more that. Can you address some of those topics too? Because I know there's been a lot of discussion about that
Oh my
lately.
gosh. That has been a topic that since I got into fitness
Yeah.
30 plus years ago, it's always been talked about.
Mm.
Because when we work out at a lower intensity, when you're at about 55% of your heart rate, your maximum heart rate, you're burning supposedly equally carbs and fat. You're burning
Mm-hmm.
both, about 50% each, roughly, at about 55 to 60% of your maximum heart rate. The harder you work, that ratio changes. So as you approach your target heart rate, you're working more carbohydrate and less fat. When you
Aha.
get to the point of anaerobic threshold, where you're at about 85 to 90%, again, everybody's a little different, but you're at that point where you can't quite catch your breath and you're at your maximum, you cannot work any harder for any more sustained period of time. That's when you're about 100% carbohydrate and no fat.
Mm.
Now, the question always comes down to, I've had clients say, well, I want to be burning fat, so I want to be working at the lowest intensity I can. I was like, well, then you may as well sit on your butt because that's when you're actually burning more fat
Uh-huh.
because
So
you're
that
not
so
really
really it
working
really
that
is
hard.
gradation. It's like carbs, fat, carb,
Exactly.
right? That I'm sort of drawing a line, guys, just so that it
An
starts
X.
with mostly fat and less carbs, and then as you work harder, those come together, and eventually you end up with more carbs and less fat, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. So then it comes down to calories burned
Mhm.
because, and you're looking at a percentage of calories. So let's say I worked out today, I did my 30 minutes. So I think it said I burned about 400 calories for that 30, 35 minutes, whatever I did. Okay. So let's say I worked out at my lowest rate. Well, then roughly 200 of that would be from carbs, 200 would be from fat, roughly. Okay. If I work out way more, well, that 400 calories would be much more from carbohydrate. But here's the kicker.
Like I said,
You
but
burn more
you're burning more
calories
calories,
when
right?
you're
So
working
wait a
more
minute,
intensely.
you're working harder, so you're actually burning more calories.
So if I'm burning at 75% and I have that ratio is now, I'm just going to say 75, 25, everybody's body is different. So don't
Right.
take
These
this
are
as
totally yeah,
these are just
these are for
rough
examples.
estimates. Yeah, rough estimates. Even at 50%, 50-50, everybody's body is different. But let's say I'm burning 75% carbs and 25% fat, but I burn an extra 200 calories. Well, guess what? I burned an extra 200 calories. So that's what it always comes down to people is, oh, what's more important? The amount of calories burned, the amount of fat burned, the percentage of fat versus carbohydrates, and there's no clear-cut answer.
Mhm.
There is no clear-cut answer as to, because that I've studied weight loss
Yes.
for
Inside and out.
30 plus years. There
Yep.
is no clear-cut answer because I've done both. I have done both. And for me, what I've told clients, and we'll get into exercise prescription in a minute, but work at whatever feels comfortable to you to start with, because I'd rather have you doing something than nothing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you can go for an hour at a moderate intensity rather than 20 minutes at a little higher intensity, well, you're probably going to burn more calories doing that. Okay. But you and I have had this conversation before. I am not a believer that calories in equals calories out for every single person
No,
because
metabolism is so individual.
metabolism is so individual that you
Yeah.
can't really say, well, I burned off 300 calories, so that means that my basal metabolic rate. No, everybody's body is different in some way, shape, or form. And when you add in hormones and menopause and all these other factors that
Mhm.
occur as we age, lots change. A
Yeah.
whole lot changes. So we can't say calories in equals calories out. For exercise prescription in general, what I tell people when they first sit down with me is I say, okay, what can you promise me you can do every day or 3 days a week? because we have to be realistic for people too. I live in an area where people, I mean, I have some attorneys who say, oh yeah, I saw my kids last night when I got home at 9:30. I said, wait, you left at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
and you got home at 9:30 at night. So some people do
Mm-hmm.
work those crazy hours. So you have to be realistic as to what they can do. And I'll say, can you do 3 days a week of 30 minutes to start with? Can you do that? And most people will say, yeah, I think I could do that. Great. Okay, it's a start. It's a start. Even if that means, okay, for those 3 days, you're going to have to get up an extra half an hour early, or go for a walk before you even get home. I've told some people downtown, I'll say, okay, during lunch hour, go for your walk. Well, I don't want to come back sweaty. Do it during dinner. Half the office is gone when you get back anyway.
And it's cooler if it's
And it's cooler. Yeah,
in DC. Yeah.
exactly. But I try and find what can be their baseline. Okay.
And I want to ping in there just a minute, because the other
Sure.
thing too is what is their flavor?
Oh yeah.
Right? Because you put it, because I know, a lot of my clients love to do just the elliptical or the treadmill or running or cycling, something really repetitive and kind of long-termish, right?
Yep.
Like they like to go for a 45-minute bike ride, or they go on the elliptical for half an hour, and that works for them.
Yep.
Other clients, that bores them to death.
Oh yeah, they won't do it.
They won't. They just won't do it. So for those guys, I've got to say, okay, well, let's figure out like a 15-minute high intensity interval training circuit for you, because you need the stimulation of doing 15 push-ups and then this and then this and then this and then this and then
Yep.
this, because otherwise you're not going to do it. So
Yep.
it's also what is their need, and what is their flavor, and what keeps them, again, what is sustainable, what will they actually do? Critical question. Just
Absolutely.
adding in that idea about what do they like, or what will they do? I mean, basically.
And that's huge. That is a huge factor. And it comes down to something that I like to call functional cardio work.
Mm-hmm.
In that, what I will do for these clients is, like you said, it's not necessarily high interval, or high intensity interval training, but it is interval. So I will have them do 5, 7, 10 exercises that are
Yes.
fairly easy.
Yep. Exactly.
Jumping jacks, knee ups, marching, step ups,
Yep.
whatever it is.
Yep.
But they're going to do it. You're going to do a minute.
Yep.
Then you're going to do, or what the one I like is 40-20, 40 seconds of work, 20 seconds of rest. That allows you 20 seconds to get to the next thing you're going to do.
Right. The next station, basically. Yeah.
And then you continue on. So your heart rate will go up and down slightly, but it's not going to peak like it does during high intensity interval training and then come all the way back down. So you're not fighting that huge bounce up and down, but it's more of a gentle, it goes up and comes slightly down, goes back up and slightly down. And by the end of the 10th exercise, what they find is that it's able to stay at a peak at a higher rate for a longer period of time.
Right.
And then I say, just repeat. And if you're doing that 10 minutes, you have your 10-minute cycle. Take a minute break, repeat. Take a minute break, repeat. That's your 30 minutes right there.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel so inundated of just, one more step, just, right. It's like,
some people love that and some people hate that.
Yeah.
Right.
I catch up on my programs. So I'll watch TV or something like that and watch my heart rate to make sure I'm working out hard enough. But that's how I can catch up with that.
Yeah. And I put my Kindle on and I'm just like, read away, because I'm a reader. So it works fine for me. Yeah.
Exactly. So for us, it works to do that. But I also find that the monotony does get to me sometimes. So I will do my functional cardio, or maybe I'll add it in 1 day a week. So I'll do 3 days on the elliptical and 1 day a little bit more more high intensity, but I watch my heart rate, and often it doesn't get that much higher, little bit, but not that much higher than it would when I'm just on the elliptical. But it has that variability of slightly going up and slightly coming down. And I break up the monotony.
Yeah, exactly.
So I find functional cardio is something that can be a lot of fun for people. And if you think about playing sports, that's kind of what you're doing. If you're thinking about basketball or soccer, a lot of those type of
they're all
sports.
episodic, right? It's like boom, down, boom, boom. Right. Work hard and then pause a moment and then work hard. Yeah.
Exactly. Tennis even, you serve and then you're running side to side, front to back, and then you take a little break and then you serve again. So it has that up and down. So for some people, it just works better.
And I want to add one little thing in there too, which is accessibility. Not
Hmm.
everybody. So two things. One, there often are inexpensive gyms in your area,
Yeah.
oftentimes 25 or 30 or $50 a month, where you
Yep.
can go and do cardio. Right? Like they've got machines, you've usually got a whole bank of various machines. And if you choose an unbusy time, you can usually get there. Right. So that's one option in terms of just accessibility. If you don't want to buy one for your home or don't have
Yep.
one or whatever. But the challenge there is then you've got to like get up, you've got to get your clothes on, you've got to get your stuff together, you got to get in the car.
Yep.
Right. So that has to be super convenient. And when they do studies on people going to gyms, like if the gym is more than like 3 miles away, people won't go.
Won't do it. Yep.
Right, it just won't happen. So the thing about the functional fitness version is usually I can have people do that in a basically about a 6 by 6 square in their
Yep.
living room, all body weight, no props if I'm going to do no props, and we can just get it going without any excuses. And
Yep.
sometimes you need no excuses, right? Like,
Yep.
okay, I can do this. There's a lot of really great apps now that will time that for you. Like there's little Tabata apps and that kind of thing where you
Yep.
can set the
Exactly.
timer. And there's even a lot of like, the 7-minute workout and things available online where you can follow along
Yep.
with that too. So that's just something again that's the no excuses version, which I sometimes need to give to clients because I know if they have to get up and get in the car and go somewhere or stop on the way back from work or whatever, it's not going to happen. So
Yeah.
just thinking about too, like again, that's that part of that sustainability.
Yep. Yep. There's an app called Stark Fitness that I've used.
Hmm.
It's it's awesome. And the reason I say that is I'm trying to pull it up now if I can show it to people on YouTube. What's really neat is I'm showing it on YouTube. If you put in what tools you have, so it shows
Oh,
a bow,
nice.
so it shows a kettlebell.
Yeah,
It'll
bands,
show bands,
etc.
all sorts of
All
things.
kinds of things. Yeah, guys, it's got like weights things, it's got kettlebells, it's got TRX. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
all the tools you could possibly have.
yeah, and it gives you a certain number of exercises for each, and you can do a random program and say,
Mhm.
I have 10 minutes to work out. Hit a random program and put down your interval of 30 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever you want it to be. And it will tell you what to do along with a video showing
Nice.
you the exercise.
Awesome.
It's really nice because I have a couple of clients who want to work out on their own the other days when they're not here. And they've downloaded this and they say, oh my gosh, it's so much fun. And you look, it's random. So sometimes the exercise is going to be like, yep, that's not for me. And you can pick
Right.
something else to do and just do it based on the time. But it's really nice just to add a little bit of flavor of variety. And like you said, you don't need a lot of space. A
Mm-mm.
6 by 6 box. And how easy is it now with all these online stores and things to get things delivered within a day or two? Bands,
Right.
tubing,
Right.
leg
Yes,
weights,
which are cheap. A lot of
kettlebells,
those are really cheap.
and those
Target
are all
has them, they're
cheap.
easy. They're cheap and they're easy to get, and there's a lot of them, and again, if you're talking about, like, little hand weights or bands, a cheap one is as good as an expensive one, like, it just doesn't
Yes,
make that especially with hand weights, it does not make a difference, like, buy the
not at
cheapest
all.
set as long as they fit your hand and you're, like, good to go. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And also, I'm going to tell you, I can't tell you how many times I've gone on to like Facebook Marketplace
Yeah,
and just type in kettlebell. There are times when people are just trying to get rid of stuff and it's
yes,
like free, just
absolutely.
come and get it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely, it's heavy, it takes up a lot of space, and I'm done with this.
I've scored 3 elliptical machines since the
Awesome.
pandemic because I was willing to come and take it out of their home.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
brought it at home. I refurbished it. One's in my family room. I sold the other two. Why not make some money on it? I know how to refurbish these things. But
yeah, awesome.
you can find things cheap and free that give you what you're looking for. And again, if someone doesn't want to join a gym, I get that. I totally understand that. But there's no excuses to move. You can do movement and
Yeah,
you
and
can
I
do it
and
in
I
a
would
small amount of space.
I would even add to that because I've played with my Apple app, I've played with, all kinds of online apps, and I'll just go on and I'll say, "Hey, here's, I wanna do 10 minutes, I wanna do something dance-based, or I wanna do something mobility-based," and I just push that button, and it's not always great, but again, if I just need somebody else to tell me what to do, because not everybody is a self-motivated exerciser, I'm very well aware of that as a dancer,
Yep.
it's like, I need somebody to tell me what to do, and then I
Yeah.
put it on and I just go through it. And I don't do the things that are stupid, because some things are like, okay, that's just stupid or not for me. I'll make something else up. But there's so many options out there now that
Yep.
can really get your heart rate up and just keep you moving. So those are
No.
nice ways to do that.
Yeah. And there are apps galore. Let's face it. There are
Yeah,
tons of
there are
apps.
11 billion. Yep.
Yeah. And find one that suits your fancy. A friend of
Mhm.
ours has Pocket Pilates, which is great.
Mhm.
If that's what you want to do, it'll at least get you moving. Cardiovascularly, it
Yep.
may not be as, intense as you'd like, but at least get you moving. And
Pilates
for a lot,
Anytime. It's always
Pilates
there.
Anytime is there.
Pilates Land. Yeah.
And I said Stark Fitness. There's a lot of different ones, and I'm
Yep. Yep.
sure every manufacturer of every type of whatever you're buying from them, they probably have their own version of a workout that you can do with their equipment,
Yep.
and do it. The point is just do something.
Mhm.
Get out there and do something, and it's better than nothing. So again, about exercise prescription, I like to tell people start with what you can do.
Yep.
And I'll usually start people 3 times a week at 30 minutes because there's no excuses at that rate. You could
Right.
say, can you do 30 minutes? Sure. When they stop seeing results,
Mhm.
that's when I'll say, okay, we need to kick this up. Can we do 40 minutes? Can we do one extra day? Can we change something? Maybe you've been walking on the treadmill. Okay, maybe that's not hard enough. And we haven't talked about monitoring heart rate yet, and we'll get to that in just a second. But we can only change a few things, right? But we can change intensity, how hard they're
Mhm.
working. We can
Yep.
change variety,
Yep.
the type of equipment they're using, frequency, the amount of times they're doing it, and duration, the
Yep.
longevity, how long they're going to do it for. So a lot of
Yep.
times I'll just say, you've been on the elliptical now for a year and a half. Guess what?
Let's do something.
Maybe let's do something different. And suddenly they're like, oh man, yeah, my heart rate's back up. Fantastic. And speaking of heart rate, I'm going to highly, highly, highly recommend you tell your clients to get a heart rate monitor.
Mhm.
I can't tell you how many times a client will say, I'm just not getting, I'm either not losing enough weight or I'm not, I don't feel like I'm getting the benefits I should. And I say, do you have a heart rate monitor? Well, I use the one on the machine sometimes,
And that
or
doesn't work at all.
sometimes they
Mine,
do.
mine, mine.
Yeah.
Apparently my blood doesn't pump loud enough for them to hear it. So literally, I can't get it to even on most of the machines. They literally can't figure out what I'm doing. So
And it jumps around for some people. Like you said,
yeah,
it'll be
yeah,
fine. It'll be steady state. And then all of a sudden it'll say 192 and you're like, oh my gosh. And then it'll say 43 and it'll jump
right,
around. So
yeah,
how accurate is that?
not
Whereas
very.
there's sort of Polar for the longest time was the company that had the heart rate monitor. And I still think it's probably the gold standard because you have to actually wear the chest strap.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yep.
think that for that, it's fantastic. It's great in an exercise physiologic, capacity.
Yeah.
I mean, we use it for research and things. It's fantastic for that. For me, I don't like wearing something. You probably don't know this about me, but I don't like wearing a bra. So I don't like something around my rib cage. It doesn't feel normal to me, and I feel like it's
Yeah.
constricting when I'm moving
I feel like I
and
can't breathe. I feel like it like hugs my ribs in. And my whole thing about breathing is like,
breathing.
I actually want to move my ribs. And when I do that with a Polar, half the time it just falls down to my waist, and I kind of can't get it to stick
Exactly.
without actually literally sticking it to me, which is annoying.
Yep.
Anyway,
So
yeah.
I'm an Apple guy. The Apple Watch for me works great. Okay, I find that it works great. I can put on whatever activity I'm doing and it monitors my heart rate, tells me roughly how many calories I'm burning. All that I'm sure is, just variable, whatever. But it gives me at least a baseline, but it gives
Mm-hmm.
me that heart rate. And I can constantly look at it during my exercise and be like, yep, I'm in my, or if I'm watching TV and I'm realizing, oh, I'm not working that hard. I'm not breathing. Oh yeah, I'm down. Okay, come on, pick it up. It's at least something that will tell me, and it's fairly accurate. Uh, Someone did a blog about this and literally monitored. I think she had on 2 or 3 different, watches. She had on the Ring. She had on the
Yeah.
Polar.
Yeah. Wow.
And in looking at them, it was interesting because Polar, of course, came out as like A plus. It was the most,
Accurate.
because the most accurate. They've perfected this. But number 2 and 3 were Garmin, and which was great, very expensive. They're more for cyclists and trekkers and things like that. But Garmin was up there, Apple Watch was also up there. They were like A and A minuses, which for me is fine. I'm not a highly competitive athlete. So for me, it's great. Fitbit was like, I think a B minus or a C plus. So it wasn't that accurate. And then the Ring, and now this was done years ago when she did this. So I'm sure technology has
It may have
gotten
gotten
better.
better. Yeah.
Yeah. But I find what works for you and what seems to be most accurate or most consistent and use it. That's what I tell
And
clients.
I would also say, I mean, there is an accessibility thing. I mean, those are Apple Watches
They
are
can be
expensive,
expensive.
and
Absolutely.
Garmin's are really expensive. So,
Oh,
and that's
yes.
not everybody can afford that just to monitor their heart rate.
Yep.
So the other thing that I do is I just put my finger up to like
Yep.
my throat, and I look at my watch and I count. I usually go for either 6 seconds or 12 seconds, and I multiply it by, by
Yep.
5 or 10, depending. And that gives me a rough rate too. So just so you
Yep.
know, there are ways to do this without massive technology and a massive investment.
Absolutely.
You have to
Absolutely.
pause for a moment and do that, but just so you know, that's how I've done that for years too.
Yeah. I mean, that's how, I mean, when I taught group exercise, that's all we had. That was before
Yeah.
Polar, did that. But I will say this, the cheapest Polar now is like $39.
Oh, that's just totally
So
affordable. That's
it's
great.
affordable for most people. And yes, it has a
Yeah.
chest strap. But also, I told a client this yesterday. I said, go on to, Facebook Marketplace or eBay. You can find people who have upgraded. My
Yeah.
birthday, I got a brand new Apple Watch. Well, you know what? I've got
Yep.
another one sitting at home, which either
Right.
one
That
of my
works
kids
fine.
is going to use
Hmm.
or I'm going to want to get rid of. So people, a lot of my times my clients will say, oh yeah, I just put my old iPad or I just put this on, to sell. So you can get things at fraction of a cost. And if you're mainly using it just for heart rate and it doesn't matter to do all the other fancy things, it may be just fine for you too. So there are less expensive options out there.
Right.
So you can, take a look and see what works best for you. But again, old school right here. It does work. It does
Oh,
work.
look, there it is. Yeah.
It does work. So hopefully this gave you a little bit of an idea of the reasons to do cardiovascular work. And I'll tell you, in rereading all of this stuff and going through the research this week, it reminded me I got to start pushing my clients a little bit more. I really do, because it is important. I need to start reminding them, look, it's about longevity. It's about health. It's not just about lifting weights and getting stronger. We still need this muscle to be strong. So it's something that reminded me, okay, I got to start pushing this a little bit more with my clients too.
And I was super excited to do this topic because again, it's a topic that is just not so much in my wheelhouse. It's not something that I think about, and it's re-inspired me. And it also made me really think about all the different ways that I can do cardio, or I can encourage my clients to do cardio. And find you just keep finding a way for them to increase that and add that into their program if they're not really inspired to do that, because it's just really important.
Yeah.
It is, in terms of longevity, in terms of future health, in terms of all those markers. That's really important. So
Yeah.
anyway, hopefully that inspired you guys as well.
And I'm going to challenge everyone out there. I want you to put together for yourself a 6x6 foot challenge. I
Mm,
want you to come up with functional cardio that you can do in a box using the most basic things, like a step, a ball, a BOSU, something you might have around the house anyway, or that a client can get from, Costco or, wherever. Bands, tubing, hand weights, whatever you can find, and put together 6 to 10 exercises and do 30-minute routine and see how you feel afterwards. See how it feels and see if you got your heart rate up and see if you had fun. And that's a big thing too. Make it enjoyable.
mm-hmm. Love it.
So I'm just putting that challenge out there to you this week, because if you can do it for yourself, when I first got into the industry and told my mom, I'll never be able to afford a gym, it's all this expensive equipment, she challenged me and said, don't use anything but a ball, a step, light hand weights, and tubing for the next month. If you can do that with your clients and they don't complain, guess what? You can go out on your own. And that was the moment that I said, yeah, I can. And so I'm going to challenge you to do the same thing for your own body, but also something that you can give your clients and say, hey, you can do this at home. It doesn't take that much space.
Love it. Okay, guys, that's your homework.
Yep, that's your homework.
And honestly, whether you're a trainer or whether you're a client, like if you're a client, if you're somebody who just likes fitness and a fitness enthusiast, think about that for yourself. Hopefully some of this
Absolutely.
inspired you to just add something into your routine or make up stuff like choose your 6 favorite exercises and put them together and see how it works for you.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, thank you for joining us this week. We've hit the hour mark, almost on the dot right
On
now.
the bot. Yep.
On the dot. Listen, if you want to give us some suggestions, please hit us up on our socials at Moving Combos, Instagram, Moving Conversations on Facebook, or movingcombos@gmail.com. You can always hit us up there. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, hit all of those buttons on everything from YouTube to your podcast of choice, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatnot. Subscribe every week. It'll be in as soon as you wake up on Tuesday morning. It'll be there so you can listen on your way to work. So we appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you guys next week.
Bye, guys.